New Year to you all. It's good to see you all here this morning. Today we are taking a look at another in the series of parables that Jesus told. And today we're going to look at a parable which is found in Luke chapter 18, verses 1 through 8. And this is a parable that Jesus told. It's called the parable of the persistent widow. And to begin, I would just like to read the story and then talk a little bit about the situation and what Jesus was trying to teach to his disciples at that time, and some of the lessons that we can draw from this for us today. This is found on page 1016 in our English Bibles, page 1016, Luke chapter 18, reading from verse 1 through 8. Then Jesus told his disciples a parable to show them that they should always pray and not give up. He said, "In a certain town there was a judge who neither feared God nor cared about men. And there was a widow in that town who kept coming to him with the plea, 'Grant me justice against my adversary.' For some time he refused, but finally he said to himself, 'Even though I don't fear God or care about men, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will see that she gets justice, so that she won't eventually wear me out with her coming.' And the Lord said, 'Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth?'" Jesus, in this parable, and actually in this chapter, was talking about prayer. Later on, we have the story of the Pharisee and the tax collector that we spoke about some time ago. And Jesus even began the parable by talking about prayer. He was very clear that the main message, the main emphasis of the story was to teach the disciples about prayer and the attitude that they were to have towards prayer. And he makes that very clear in verse 1, to show them they should always pray and not give up. In this story, we have three characters. We have the judge, we have the widow, and we have an adversary. Now, the judge is described in not very flattering terms. Usually when we think about a judge, what kind of image do you have? What are some ideas or words or thought that comes to mind when you think of the word judge?
Honorable.
Okay, honorable.
Strict.
What's that?
Strict.
Strict, okay.
In my country, bribe taking.
What's that?
In my country, bribe taking.
Bribe taking, okay, corrupt.
Could be authority.
I'm sorry?
Authority.
Okay, authority. Alright, so yeah, when we think of judge, most of the time we think of words like honor, justice, law, authority, maybe corruption in some countries and some cultures. But when we think about a judge, we usually think about someone who is law-abiding, law-enforcing, someone who has a sense of justice and honor. But this judge, he didn't seem to be that kind of person. He was very self-centered and very arrogant and proud. And he didn't care about anybody else. He didn't care about what other people thought about him. And he didn't even have a fear of God. He didn't believe in God, or he didn't think that God could do anything to him either. He was very confident in his power and in his position and in his authority. And so we have this one character, a guy who's not an honest judge, someone who simply does whatever he wants. He interprets the law as he decides, and perhaps, as Noah mentioned, corrupt. You know, people might present a case, but if he didn't receive a payoff or a bribe, or he didn't see any advantage to him, or maybe he didn't want to upset the other person, he might not rule actually by the law. He was a law unto himself. And the second character in this story we have is a widow. A woman who had lost her husband, and apparently she had no children, or children old enough to protect her and to take care of her and to act on her behalf. And she had some sort of a problem with another person called the adversary, her enemy. And this woman, she had appealed for justice, and she had been denied. The judge had refused. And yet, she did not give up. She persisted. She went again and again. And not just to the court, but even outside of the court, to his house or on the street. She kept after him, hounding him. You have to give me justice. You have to, you know my cause is right. So we have this woman who no one else is there for her. No one else will plead her case. And so she herself has had to plead her case. And in desperation, she continues to try to get a just verdict, to receive a favorable response, and to win what is owed her in this particular case. And the third character we don't really have any information about, except that they are the adversary. And we might, from the situation, we might think that this adversary, this opponent, was someone who was more powerful, or someone who was richer, who had paid the judge. And so the judge had ruled in the other person's favor initially when the case was brought. So this other person was also a dishonest person, probably. And in the story, this woman who has come, who is lost but has not given up, she continues to press her case. Finally, she wears the judge out. He gets tired of hearing her. He's tired of her bothering him in his court and on the street and coming to his house. And even though he doesn't care anything about the woman, and even though his opinion about the situation and her case hasn't changed, he rules in her favor simply to get rid of her. I don't want to listen to your complaining anymore. Whatever. Okay, I'll agree. Just leave me alone. And so the woman is finally able to get the justice that she deserves. Now, the story is kind of a simple one. And sometimes people wonder, well, you know, what real value or what real lessons or what kind of meaning can we draw from the story? Well, I think there are a few lessons that we can learn and a few messages that Jesus was trying to share with the people listening and to his disciples specifically. And, of course, one message was about the importance of prayer, as he stated before even sharing the story. That if you are persistent, if you continue, if you stick to it, you can get a result. You have to be persistent. You can't give up easily. That it's important that you hang on to God. And of course, the Bible has quite a few references and stories related to this. In the Old Testament, we have the very famous story of Jacob wrestling with the angel. And he hung on and he refused to let go of this angel until the angel would grant his request. And in the New Testament, Paul in Thessalonians talks about pray without ceasing, pray in all circumstances, don't stop. And so I think one of the simple lessons that Jesus was trying to teach his disciples and to emphasize to those listening was that prayer was something that you were to be doing constantly and persistently. That you should not give up in your prayers. It should be something you were doing continually. Another message that I think Jesus was trying to share with his followers there, some think that this was a promise and a prophecy and a warning about what would be coming soon to the early church. That soon he would not be with them anymore. And they would have difficult times. There would be times of trial. And of course, in this case, the woman is a symbol for the church. Christ is the bride, or the bridegroom. The bride is the church. And in this symbolism, the woman represents the church. And the early church, as Jesus foresaw the persecution that was going to come to the early church by the Jews very shortly. And that for a number of years they would suffer at the hands of the Jews. But that relief from that would come, and it would come quickly. And when the Romans came and destroyed Jerusalem, the Jewish persecutions of the Christian church came to an end. And so there are some who believe that that story was meant to warn and to encourage the church that even during the difficult time that was coming soon, they were not to give up. They were to hold on to God and trust God and pray to God for rescue and relief from the trials that would come. And though they would suffer much, they would receive reward and rescue. Now, another message I think that Jesus was trying to teach to his disciples was to contrast the situation of this woman, the relationship between this woman and the judge, with the relationship between the disciples and God. Now, in the case of the woman, she did not know the judge. She and the judge had no close personal connection. But in the case of God's people, they are chosen by God. They are His elect. They are the apple of His eye, as the Bible says. And so the relationship between the woman and the judge was not a friendly or a loving relationship. But the relationship between us and God is one based on love. In this story, the woman was alone. She had no one to help her, to support her, to be with her. There were no other people to provide her with assistance. And we, as God's people, are many. We are a family. We have each other for support and for love and care. And no matter where you go around the world, you can find believers, people that share in the same trust and the same love, and whom you can receive support from. This woman, she did not have a close relationship with the judge. She had to approach the judge from a distance. But we, as children of God, can come close to God. And in a very famous passage in Hebrews chapter 4, if you'd like to turn, that's on page 1163. Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15 and 16. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weakness, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet without sin. Let us therefore approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. This woman, when she approached the judge, she was not confident, but she came anyway. But as children of God, we can approach God's throne with confidence. We have the promises, the assurances of His love and His desire for our happiness. And so we can approach Him with confidence and in love. And related to the same verse, The woman had to plead her own case. She had no one to act as her lawyer. And usually it's not a good idea to be your own lawyer. If you go to a court of law, if you want to do well, you need to find an attorney, someone who knows the law, who can study the case, your case, and who can appeal on your behalf. And of course, as we've read in the same verse, we have someone to speak on our behalf. Christ is our intercessor. Christ is our mediator. We do not have to plead our own case. He is pleading for us. In the case of the woman, she had no guarantee of an answer. And she had to persistently, again and again, ask without any idea if she would ever receive any positive or helpful outcome. But as Christians, we know that God will provide all that we need. That if we call, He will answer. Now, it may not be immediately, but we know that God will work out all things according to His purpose. And that the answer that He provides, we will be happy with in the long run, if we proceed in faith and in patience. This woman, as she tried to find justice, her access was limited. She had to go to the court, or she had to go to the judge's house, or she had to try to look and find him on the street. But we can reach out to God at any time and at any place. God is always available to us. He is only a step away. And we just have to ask, and He will be there for us in our hour of need. In the case of the woman, the judge was not happy to work with her. The judge did not like her. The judge had negative feelings about her, and he just wanted to be rid of her. But how much of a contrast when we look at the relationship that we have as believers with God. A God of love, a God of care, a God of concern, who knows our every need and has promised to provide all that we ask for. In the Sermon on the Mount, when Jesus was talking with the people, He talked about the idea of, you who are sinners and wicked, you know how to give good things to your children. If your son asks for a fish or an egg, what will you give him? A stone? A scorpion? No. You know how to give good things to your children. How much more does our God of love know how to provide the things that we need? We need to be persistent in what we ask for. We need to hold on to the promises and hold on to God. To pray without ceasing.